Good evening, and welcome to the August 22nd meeting of the Jefferson County Board of Education. Prior to this meeting, the board conducted an executive session for the purpose of discussions relating to collective bargaining negotiations and a public hearing for the purpose of hearing public comments regarding a proposed 2018 general tax levy. No action was taken. At this time, I'd ask that you join us for our traditional moment of silence. Thank you. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Our vision statement will now be read by Board Member Steph Horn.
All Jefferson County public school students graduate prepared, empowered, and inspired to reach their full potential and contribute as thoughtful, responsible citizens of our diverse, shared world.
Thank you, Member Horn. Ms. Terry Robinson, would you please come forward to present this evening's recognitions and resolutions?
Dr. Polio, Board Chair Chris Brady, and members of the Jefferson County Board of Education, tonight we begin with the honor of bestowing recognition upon Gil Hernandez Gaza, a student at Butler Traditional High School, for being selected to participate in Boys Nation, which was held in Washington, D.C. in July. During the week-long event, Gil, along with 97 other young men from around the nation, met to conduct hearings on bills submitted by program delegates and to attend government trainings that included lectures, forums, and visit to federal agencies, national shrines, institutions, memorials, and historical sites. Gil was also presented with the opportunity to meet and hear President Trump speak. Dr. Polio, Board Member Benjamin Gies, and Assistant Superintendent Dr. Glenn Beatty, please come forward to congratulate Gil. Joining in the recognition is Principal William Allen and Teacher Jonathan Joseph. Gil's family is also here with us tonight, and I'd like to ask them to please stand and be recognized. Family members, please stand and be recognized. Next, we are so proud and excited to honor the Pleasure Ridge Park High School baseball team for winning the 2017 Whitaker Baker Kentucky High School Athletic Association State Baseball Tournament. The team defeated Simon Kitten High School 6-5 to win its sixth state title. The baseball team completed the season with a 15 consecutive game win and is coached by Bill Miller, an all-time winning state coach. Dr. Polio, Board Member Benjamin Gies, and Assistant Superintendent Dr. Glenn Beatty, please come forward to extend congratulations to the PRP baseball team and Coach Bill Miller. Joining in the recognition is Assistant Coaches Derek Mattingly, Richard Hawks, Sharon Blyschek, and Kevin Whiteneck.
One, two, three.
For our final recognition this evening, we have the honor of recognizing Athra Alaboudi, teacher at Olmsted Academy South, for receiving the Outstanding Mathematics Design Collaborative Teacher Award from the Southern Regional Education Board. The award recognizes a teacher who has shifted instruction using mathematics design collaborative practices that engage students in understanding, reasoning, and applying math content to complex problems. Dr. Polio, Board Member Linda Duncan, and Assistant Superintendent Brad Weston, please come forward to congratulate Athra for her outstanding professional accomplishment. Joining in the recognition is Principal Angela Allen. Dr. Polio and members of the Jefferson County Board of Education, this concludes our recognitions for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Is there a vote to receive the recognitions? Motion made by Member Geese, second made by Member Porter. All those in favor? Motion passes. At this time, it is our custom to take a couple of moments and let anyone, especially our students, now that our school year has started, we'll take a break, and for those students to go home and do any homework you might have to do, or sign any autographs, as the case might be for some of you. So at this time, we'll take 2 to 3 minutes, and we'll come back in just a moment. I am speaking directly into the microphone, so those in the back were raising their hand. All right, moving on to our next item will be the recommendation for approval of the meeting agenda. I would like to make a motion to amend our meeting agenda. I move to amend the meeting agenda to include an additional action item regarding approval of a proposed collective bargaining agreement between the Board of Education and the Service Employees International Union Local 320. Is there a second? Second made by Vice Chair Wilner. All those in favor? Motion passes. So we have one amendment. Is there any other further discussion or amendments? Dr. Polio.
I would like to recommend to the board that we move the comprehensive educational financial planning and management calendar to an information item for this meeting, and then bring it back at a future meeting for an action item in order to give board members time to consider that, have the presentation reflect, and possibly bring changes in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. I will need a motion by a board member for us to go through. Motion made by Vice Chair Wilner, second made by Member Porter. All those in favor? Motion passes. So we have amended our agenda twice now. Now I need a motion for to vote for the amended agenda. Motion made by Member Gee, second by Member Kolb. All those in favor? Motion passes. Our agenda is now amended. Our next item up on our agenda will be the recommendation for approval of the minutes of our previous meeting. Is there a motion? Motion made by Member Porter, seconded by Member Kolb. All those in favor? Motion passes. And now we're up to our superintendent's report. Dr. Polio.
Thank you, Chair Brady, board members. It's been an exciting 2 weeks since the last time we met and had a superintendent's report, so I'm honored to bring this report for August 22nd, and as always, focus on our 3 main areas for the year for improvement. 1, improving culture and climate. 2, increasing student learning. And 3, improving our organizational coherence. I believe that we've worked extensively over the past 2 weeks to do that, and we'll take steps tonight to work on several of these items that I think are very important for our organization and school district as we move forward. So first of all, on improving culture and climate, I wanted to speak about the first 5 days of school. Many of you I've had the opportunity to visit schools with. I know I've been in 13 schools since the first day of school, and I want to commend our cabinet and assistant superintendents for being in schools and being active, spreading that message of the things we're working on over the first 5 days. Very proud when I walked out to my car about 8 a.m. on one morning at school, and there wasn't one assistant superintendent car in the lot, not because they weren't here, but because they were all in schools. So I think that's very important that we are active and in schools. Also, all of our cabinet members, we have a schedule this year for being in schools actively and making sure that we connect with our schools and know exactly what's happening in our schools. We think that is critical for our central office staff to connect with schools throughout the year. And as you know, board members, looking forward to having days with you as we go into schools in your district to look for things that are going very well in schools and ways we can improve them also. The energy in our schools is very evident right now. We've had a excellent first 5 days of school, so essentially a first week. But the energy and passion is very evident. The 13 schools that I've been at all throughout this county, I think we do feel a renewed energy and passion from our teaching and employees throughout the district, and there is no doubt that that is evident to our students, because I believe very thoroughly that students see right through a lack of energy and passion, and it's important that our teachers, our staff, our administrators, our central office people have a passion for what they do, love their job, and are really, really good at it. So we're going to continue to work on that throughout this year. The first 5 days are the easiest to do that. It's important that we continue and work on that throughout the year and ensure that we have that same energy and passion in every classroom on day 100, day 150, and day 175. Also, increasing student learning, we have a very important step that we are taking. You are approving tonight the MOU for a universal screener through NWEA for all of our K through 8 students, and then for some of our 9th grade students, in order to have a universal screener where we can assess where every student is at the start of the year, the middle of the year, and at the end of the year. We believe that it is critical for us to know where students are across grade levels and across schools, so that when a student transfers from one school to the other, the receiving schools will automatically have data on that student and be able to provide interventions. We've spoken to school after school, and many of our schools have paid for this on their own, out of their own funds throughout the past several years. We feel it is important for us to do that systemically as a district, so every single K through 8 student will have this opportunity, and every school will have this opportunity to provide the interventions that are needed for students to be successful. So we can continue to say that we want all students to read on grade level by the end of the 3rd grade, but if we don't have any way that we measure that to ensure that, we're only providing lip service to that. So it is $10, approximately $10.50 per student. So it is a significant expense, but we believe that it is critical for moving our students forward. Dr. Coleman and I both believe that we have to have a balance between deeper learning initiatives while also making sure that we have the skills necessary in literacy and numeracy so that all of our students are middle school ready out of elementary school, high school ready out of middle school, and then transition ready out of high school. And we think this is a big step to get us there. So we're excited to present that to you this evening. And finally, with improving organizational coherence, tonight you will be presented with an MOU with the Louisville Promise Partners. We believe that this is a major step forward in making sure that we have organizational coherence. As you will find out, the document that we have tonight will be a commitment to the Louisville Promise Partners that we will work together to facilitate the success of this initiative. So more will be coming out of this, as you well know. But the real basis of this agreement is that we bring coherence to all of our systems throughout JCPS and throughout city, philanthropy, and organizations throughout our community to make sure that we do 2 things. Number 1, that we provide the necessary wraparound services that students need to be successful. We believe that this agreement with all of the partners at Louisville Promise will do that. And secondly, to increase the college access through financial means and scholarships for the students of JCPS as they graduate from high school. So with this initiative, we believe that this is bringing organizational coherence, not only through JCPS, but through many organizations throughout our communities. Excited to bring that to you tonight. I know you've heard many hours of this over the past month or 2, but this is work that I think a lot of partners throughout the city of Louisville have worked on, and I think it's a big step forward for us. Finally, I wanted to address yesterday, Solar Eclipse Day. It seemed to be on the minds of everybody for several weeks, and I did want to address that. It was a very challenging decision for us. Many times it's very easy from the cheap seats to make that decision, but when you are sitting in a chair and have to make that decision and with the assistance of cabinet, it's never very easy. But what we fell back on, as opposed to canceling school, was 2 guiding principles. And we believe those principles are very important to this board. Number 1 being equity, and number 2 being deeper learning. And we felt that having our kids learn in schools touched both of these. So we have many students who don't have the ability to be out of school and have educational enhancement opportunities. And we wanted those students to experience this hands-on learning opportunity. And then to have students that were actually working outside, seeing what was going on, reflecting in notebooks. I don't know if there could be anything that would be considered more deeper learning than that. So in the end, we felt that it was critical that we keep our students in schools, but obviously student safety and well-being comes first. As always, I want clear communication and organization, and I felt we had issues with that on Friday that caused a lot of consternation amongst schools. So Saturday, I did a lot of digging into eyeglass safety for solar eclipse. I know a whole lot about ISN numbers that probably will never have to use again. But in the end, depended on general counsel to make the determination, and we felt that that was the right way. And very pleased when we got out to schools yesterday and saw the pictures and the experiences that many of our children have that might not have that opportunity ever again. And so proud of the way it all worked out in the end. We would have liked to had it gone smoother last week, at the end of last week, but I take responsibility for that. next time there's a solar eclipse, we'll be better prepared. But in the end, I was very happy to see the experience our children got, the learning they got, and the equitable access and opportunities they got. So ended up being a very successful day for our teachers and students. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Polio. And to tag on to that, the committee for the 24-24 solar eclipse will be meeting next week. Is that correct? So
We're moving on it now.
okay. Getting a jump on it. All right, so our next item up will be persons requesting to address the board regarding action, information, or regarding our consent items. There are 0 speakers for that. However, we do have 1 speaker requesting to address the board regarding non-agenda items. So if Reverend Ferris will come up, Reverend Ferris, to discuss dyslexia, ADHD, and learning disabilities. If you please make your way on up. Let me read a brief statement. In accordance with Board Policy 01.421, the board expects that persons who have signed up to address the board will limit their remarks to the subject that they list at the time they signed up, that their presentation will not include any defamatory or abusive remarks about the subject, and that they will present their remarks in a manner that is consistent and orderly conduct by the board of its business. Informational handouts may be given to our board secretary for distribution in accordance with policy. Each speaker is allowed 3 minutes to address the board. At the end of 2.5 minutes, a bell will sound once. You will then have 30 seconds to conclude your remarks. At the end of 3 minutes, a bell will sound twice, indicating that your time is up. The superintendent will look into the speaker's issues and, if necessary, represent the board in following up or recommend action to the board. Also, in accordance with Board Policy 01.421, the board reserves the right to limit, extend, or terminate any speaker's presentation if the speaker's remarks are not consistent with the requirements of board policy. So, with all that said, Mr. Ferris, the floor is now yours.
Thank you. First of all, let me say good evening to all of you all.
I'm sorry to interrupt just for a moment. Make sure the microphone is on. If you can move that up so we can hear you.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
I want to say good evening to all of y'all, and I hope you had a great day. My concern is for the few schools that I've visited. They told me that the Jefferson County Public Schools does not consider dyslexia a learning disability, and I was kind of shocked to hear that. And they also told me that they're not equipped for that with children that has dyslexia, and I was mostly shocked to hear that. And the schools that I went to, because my grandson has dyslexia, and I was appalled to hear that they don't consider dyslexia a learning disability when it really is. And the ADHD, the schools that he went to for ADHD, I was appalled on how the teachers treated him. I was really appalled. And not only my child, there's some more children out there with dyslexia and ADHD, and they're not getting the learning, the teaching from the teachers that's supposed to be qualified to teach these children that has this learning disability. They just don't have it, and I'm sorry to say that, but I have to go by what I see. And I tried to call the superintendent, but they said he was busy, and I can understand that. I was trying to work with Dr. Hoggins when she was in to try to see if we could get something going to where these children could get a better source of resources on their IEPs or what have you, to help them to learn. Those with the ADHD and those that have this dyslexia. I've talked to doctors at Weisskopf, and they told me that teachers, whoever's qualified to teach these children, should not be treating them the way that they be treating them. And I was appalled to hear that, because if you qualify to teach a child a certain way and they're supposed to learn and they don't, as a teacher and as an adult, let me say that, as an adult and a qualified personal teacher, you ought to be able to qualify and teach a child on the basis of what they're able to learn. But if they don't have the necessities to learn, then what do you do then? because they said that the Jefferson County Public Schools does not recognize dyslexia as a learning disability. Now, can you help me to understand that?
Thank you, Reverend Ferris. And as stated earlier, first of all, thank you for sharing your remarks and taking the time to come down here. As I stated earlier, the superintendent will look into the concerns that you brought up in your remarks, and we'll follow up with you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Follow up.
Okay, so now we're on to action items. As stated earlier, we've amended our agenda. So the first action item that was originally listed will now be an informational item, which means our first action item will be the recommendation for approval of memorandum of understanding with Louisville Promise Partners. I know we have some presenters that are making their way up, and while you're doing that, Dr. Polio, if you would like to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair Brady. So as I said in superintendent report, the importance of this memorandum of understanding with Louisville Promise Partners. I want to reiterate the point again of our memorandum of understanding today is that we are agreeing to be a partner and work together. We're making that commitment to work together for the success of this initiative. We will have further MOUs that will come as a result of this work down the road, but this is the initial commitment that we are making. I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan Lowe to give us a short presentation.
Hi, thanks for hearing us tonight on the Memorandum of Understanding. With me tonight is Denise Nelson, who's a fellow with the Weiss Institute. As you're aware, we've had a number of meetings about the MOU and have talked through the details of it. Essentially, the goal here is to have agreement amongst a wide variety of organizations across the city, a total of 16 with the initial MOU, to where everyone is agreeing that we will work together to facilitate success for this enterprise. And really, the big goal here is to get as many students who are interested and willing to go on to post-secondary education to do so, and to do so successfully. There are a couple of components to that. One of them is to have tuition scholarships that are available that will either, eliminate or reduce the barriers to post-secondary education based on money or funding, but then also, perhaps more importantly, to work together to improve the systems across the different organizations so that we're spending our money more efficiently and more effectively to assist students to get every student what they need to succeed. So wraparound services, and we envision pre-K through high school graduation and indeed into post-secondary education so that students are supported in all ways, both academically but then socially, emotionally, physically. There are a huge number of things that affect the success of students. As Dr. Polio said, this is a starting point. It's agreeing to work together. Moving forward, they're going to be, you will have the opportunity to review and approve or not approve a series of agreements that go into more detail. So the next one that's going to be coming probably within the next month is a data sharing agreement that will be vetted by our legal folks and IT experts and security people to make sure that that's solid and tight. Those two things, this MOU and the data sharing agreement, form the basis for steps after that, which essentially is collection of data and then analysis of data to inform decision making across the groups. The table right now is 16. Those are the folks that are in or signatories to the MOU are the people who are currently a member of the Louisville Promise Cabinet. Our expectation is that additional people will be invited. There are a couple that we've already identified as potentially should be there, and we just have to get there. But in the meantime, we want to move forward. There's a good bit of momentum that we want to make sure that we're taking advantage of. Just to let you know, you will be the 9th entity to sign the MOU. So Jefferson County Teachers Association, Urban League, Spalding University, Centerstone, Kentuckiana Works, Simmons College, 55,000 Degrees, Metro United Way have all signed. We did a presentation just at 6 o'clock tonight with the the 15th District PTA, and we're hoping that after consideration that they will be signing in the next day or two, looking for signature from the mayor and 15,000 Degrees, hopefully by the end of next week. So collectively, we're moving forward, and if you have any questions for me and Denise, we'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Lowe. And I also want to point out a couple folks that are in the audience. If you are a community partner or representing a community partner, would you please take a moment and stand? I see we have a couple of our community partners here. I just want to say thank you, and I want to applaud and give, again, gratitude and thanks to your commitment to our community. Do any board members have any questions or concerns they would like to ask? Member Duncan.
Just a quick question. This MOU is designed to build this collaboration. Is there a time limit on this MOU, or do we, if it takes us more than 1 year, does this go beyond 1 year, or how do we figure the time that we're going to be?
It expires on June 30th, 2019. The bridge to a longer term thing is that within the MOU is an agreement that the entities will enter into or develop a 6-year pro forma that essentially is the roadmap to sustainability for the enterprise. So in June 30, 2019, you're ready to kind of step away. That would be your opportunity. Hopefully the work in between will have you, hopefully we will have built something that is useful for kids to move forward and for their education.
All right.
Any further questions, Member Duncan?
No, that's good.
Any other board member? Okay. I'll just point out a couple things, not really ask questions. But first of all, again, I want to thank everyone involved with this. This has been an ongoing process that the district and many people within district administration have been involved with, including our acting superintendent, who was kind of brought on board somewhat recently, I suppose. So, but, for a long time, I've been talking about the fact that, to me, the #1 issue affecting public education, and actually really education in general and in our community, is poverty. I've said for a long time that poverty is a multifaceted problem that's going to require a multifaceted solution. No one board member or board or district is going to solve that issue, and it's incumbent upon all of us to come together and work together to solve this issue, because each of us, community organizations, each of us within the community can come together and be a part of the solution that brings about an end to poverty, and also will, by effect, increase the educational attainment of our students. This is a part of that process. I think that this is certainly a step in the right direction. JCPS has done things in the past, such as Louisville Linked, which is also, in a way, a very collective way of trying to bring a lot of folks into one umbrella. I think this takes it a few steps further. And this is the beginning of the process. Now, I do want to point out one thing that that Mr. Lowe had brought up earlier regarding some of the other agreements that are other memorandums of understanding that will come before us, and specifically regarding data sharing. If you will look into the agreement, there is in big, bold print, data sharing agreements that protect student privacy and conform to all relevant state and local laws will be coming back to us for agreement or for approval. I know that there's been some concern regarding FERPA, and I know that legal counsel has talked about this to a degree, and we want to make sure that we have very good data sharing agreements with that, and that this data stays within the partners themselves and isn't, taken out of context or sold to another company or to another organization that might come into our community. I know there are other cities that have had issues with that, namely to our south, but I just want to really emphasize that one issue, because I've heard some feedback about that and I've had some concerns about it too. But overall, this is something that's going to move the needle. And I just want to say my 2 cents on that and ask that my colleagues consider approving this memorandum of understanding. So with that said, I ask if there is a motion to approve the MOU with Louisville Promise Partners. Motion made by Member Horn, second by Member Porter. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now on to our next item. This is the recommendation for approval of tax rates for fiscal year 2017-18. I will turn it over to Dr. Polio to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair Brady. We, as you stated in the tax hearing prior to the board meeting, the property tax rate recommended is 70.4 cents per $100 of assessment. For a $100,000 home, that would be $704. This is a reduction in our current rate of 70.8 cents. As a result of this rate and the increase in assessment, it will generate about $19.2 million additional revenue, $19.2 million due to that increased assessment values. $3.5 million of that generated from new property. We will have that additional funds. However, as I've spoken with you, will be offset some by a reduction in SEEK revenue from the state, as our SEEK revenue will decrease significantly as a result of increased property assessment. So at this time, I recommend the tax rate of 70.4 cents.
Colleagues, are there any board members wish to discuss or make any comments? Okay, I'll make one. I know that there are some folks in the community that say, oh, well, the board has to do this. No, the board can actually could choose to go over this. We had a speaker earlier, our single speaker, earlier during our tax hearing that actually recommended this very thing. I just want to let everyone know for the record that we could choose to go over the 4% if we chose to do so. Of course, that may mean that this item would go on for approval through a ballot initiative, and in an off-year election, that's not probably the best thing to do. But I do want to let everyone know that we could choose to do that. So when we have that criticism that's lobbied at us from time to time, we can choose to go another way if we wish to do so. That being said, I don't think there's any discussion about going over that, and I have no intention of doing that either. So with that being said, is there a motion to approve the tax rates for fiscal year 2017-18? Motion made by Member Duncan, seconded by Member Horn. All those in favor? Motion passes. Now on to our next item, which is an item that we had to add earlier. And please bear with me. I have to, this is not the typical contract verbiage that we normally use. So I move that the Board of Education approve the collective bargaining agreement between the board and Service Employees International Local Union 320 as presented to the board, subject to the superintendent receiving the signatures to such agreement of the representatives of the union listed in the agreement as signatories for the union, and that the board authorizes the representatives of the school district listed therein as the signatories for the school district to sign the agreement after the signatures of the representatives of the union have been received. And that's my motion. Is there a second? Second made by Member Kolb. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Now we're on to informational items. Our informational items, of which there were originally none, we now have one, which is originally a recommendation item. And this is going to be an information item regarding the Comprehensive Education Financial Planning and Management Calendar for fiscal year 2018-19. Dr. Polio, would you introduce this item, please?
Chair Brady and board members, the Comprehensive Educational Financial Planning and Management Calendar, required document by the Kentucky Department of Education that lays out the process for fiscal year 2018-19 with budget process, which we began the process, I think, earlier than ever before when we had a work session, I believe that was 2 weeks ago, to begin the discussion of budget priorities. So we have already begun the 18-19 planning process. We will be finishing up the 17-18 process very soon, as we just got tax hearing information and our 5th day enrollment count, which will help us to bring that to you soon. But we are obviously beginning the 18-19 process, and a big part of that is developing that calendar of events that will take place with board members and school personnel to plan. So at this time, I would like to bring CFO Cordelia Harden up to present this information item for your consideration prior to passing it at a subsequent board meeting.
Thank you. This calendar is what we use internally, as well as to provide you, the board, information so you're aware of the events and the collaboration that takes between all departments in order to develop the budget. We are working with 3 budgets at any given time in the district. So what this planning calendar does is really concentrates more on the 18-19 budget. The 17-18, as Dr. Polio said, we're already in the process there because the year has begun. We will come forward in September with the working budget for 17-18. So again, this is more of the 18-19 processes that we use. We actually have another calendar that we use internally in addition to this that is even more detailed, that actually assigns tasks to individuals within the financial planning department to ensure that everyone knows what steps it takes in order to pull all this together. And so any questions you may have?
I do want to add to this an important part. This is a plan, so very changeable as we go through this. So at any time, we can add a work session or other items to this list. This is essentially a roadmap or a plan from this point for the next 12 months. So I did want to make sure that board members knew that.
Any board member comments or questions? Member Horn.
I'm really excited just to have a little bit more time, so I'm thankful that this is an informational item. We get our stuff on Wednesday, and we have a lot of, to read, and then there's been a lot of work in the Finance Committee to just kind of, I guess, work on the correlating kind of the lessons learned document that just came out, along with our budget workflow document that we've been working on for a year or so, with actually seeing this. So to see it together will be really helpful, I think. So just the Finance Committee will send this out, and we'll try to give as much feedback as we can and some input on it just between this and maybe the next meeting. We'll try to do that. The question I had, I guess I'll say it, if one of our 3 main goals is the organizational coherence, Dr. Polio, the responsibility for the different things that are going on, demographics department doing our allocations, there's, he's within, I think, data management, you know what I mean? Then we've got finance people, we've got the board, we've got different cabinet. It's just there's a lot going on. And that's another thing I'd love to see, whether you think, you looking at this too, whether the coherence, how these people are all working together to come up with what the recommendations are for like priorities, and then also like the allocations. That's just kind of a puzzle piece that I'd love to, make sure that we are organizationally coherent with this process.
I agree. I think we've identified in our work together some needs to make this more systemic and less of 155 different schools, groups, central office, divisions. And there needs to be that ability to do some of that, but we all need to have some coherence. So an example of that is our universal screener that we've talked about, and funding things that, and then providing the program evaluation of those and getting that to you are so important. So I agree with that, and we will continue to work on that.
And I think just the only other question I want to make sure, I think there was some really good work done by Dr. Razor with his facility optimization study that took a long time, took like a year, and to make sure that that work is still considered within the allocations. It's just, it seems like we do a good job looking at the school-based surveys and updating those room surveys, but also making sure we're looking at the data that was so, collected. We want to make sure that isn't lost. That's just one other thing that's really important here to me.
Any of the experts want to take on capacity? Come on, Dr. Dossett, wake up.
I agree.
Thank you.
So I think it's important that we look at how schools are using their buildings, and that is information that we get through the room usage survey and program capacity, but we also need to make sure that we're looking at what some of the data that was developed in the infrastructure assessment when it comes to optimal capacity and how we can balance and get closer alignment between those two numbers. So yes, I think we need to look at both.
So I think the key on capacity between the two is obviously, I'm sure Dr. Razor used his eyes a lot to make, and so we do have some schools with some real capacity issues. We have some other areas, and I've worked in too, where we thought we were at capacity and really weren't, and identifying some ways to grow without affecting instruction in a negative way. So, having a balance between talking to schools about their needs and if they're at capacity, and providing, some decisions also on ways that they can grow. But we definitely have schools that have capacity issues that we're going to have to address.
Vice Chair Wellner?
Yeah, thanks for touching on the capacity issue, and that I think we all recognize that if you go in schools, you know that there are issues. So I appreciate that, and appreciate Board Member Horn for calling that out in this context. 2 weeks ago, it feels like a really long time ago, but 2 weeks ago we had a really, I thought, excellent work session, probably the best work session since I've been on the board, where we discussed board priorities, and we got an early enough start on the following year's school calendar to really hear from the board, what are this board's priorities, where do we want to be investing the resources that we have to get the biggest bang for our buck in terms of moving the needle for our students. So a question that I asked at that work session was, how do we get from 7 board members saying here are our individual priorities, where fortunately there was a tremendous amount of overlap. There was, it's not going to be rocket science to pull that together, but what is the step that we need to get from those 7 individual sets of priorities to the board speaking as one voice? Here are our priorities collectively as a board. That feels really, really important to me, and that we're making good progress there. And so as part of this financial planning, I would really like to see how we continue that dialogue between management and board to make sure that we're there, rather than saying, well, we think we heard this from the board, and really bringing that back to the board so that we were all on the same page.
Well, I would say the thing we did well at that work session was to at least come with some recommendations prior to that, but then not spend the entire time presenting to you, and instead giving you plenty of time. I think we had 90 minutes, and 2 weeks ago seems like a lifetime ago at this point, but that we gave plenty of time for your input and discussion, which, because of that, I think we found that many of your priorities are the same across, and so we heard 4 or 5 of the same things from you, and we have been working to group those into themes that we know that this is what we heard from several of you, and then to go through a process where at a future work session we want it to be clear when we officially begin the allocation process that we are saying as a board, this is where you believe our priorities should be. And this is where we would like to see funding, especially with support of new programs and things behind these priorities. So we would want to bring that back to you in a work session in the near future before we begin any type of allocation process, so that we say in the end, these are exactly the board priorities you have. We heard from you, we adjusted based on that. This is the wording you would like to have, and then they become very public.
Member Porter.
Dr. Polio, I'd like to ask a question that kind of aligns with that as we talked about the things that were important to us at that meeting. One of the things that I have realized in visiting the schools in the first 4 days is that some of the programs that currently exist in the schools will go away at the end of this academic year, and I was not really aware of that when we had the conversation. So when we look at budgeting for next year, will we talk about if a principal supports an existing program that's in their building, is there an opportunity to continue that particular program? And I'm speaking specifically in this terms about the Compassionate Schools program, because after 3 years, that program has an opportunity to go away. But if we find that that is successful in a particular building and helpful to the student population that they serve, then is it the board's responsibility, or will you come to us and say, if we want to continue these programs, specific programs in the schools, that we're going to add that to the budget? How do we manage that, please?
Well, there's two different things, I believe, when it comes to evaluation. And when I'm done, I don't know if Dina wants to pitch in on this. So we have individual programs at schools that are not systemic, that a site-based council might say, we believe that this program, this contract, this speaker, this professional development is important for our school, using our funds or grant funds, whatever that might be. I think it's important for us to allow schools to continue to do that. I don't think we have the capacity to evaluate each and every individual school program, but a principal is going to have, and a principal and a site-based council and a staff are going to have to tell us how this is research-based, how you will evaluate whether it's successful for your school based on Vision 2020. When it comes to larger programs such as Compassionate Schools, we have the capacity to evaluate whether that's effective based upon the goals that we've set for them. Now, sometimes that doesn't just come down to increased reading and writing scores. Compassionate Schools might be more about a student belonging, enjoying school more, and those still can be measured or evaluated, but they obviously become more difficult during that time. But yes, those would be programs that don't necessarily go away because it's just the end of the cycle. We would have to evaluate it as a larger program and then bring back a recommendation to you as a board. Sum it up okay?
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further discussion? Member Horn.
The only other question I had was just to try to make sure that the program evaluation was actually within the calendar, because, you know, you could get to that date, which would be like I think it's number 15, where you could decide that current programs like a Compassionate Schools or like a Music and Arts that are actually existing programs, or even just allocating the funds to schools on a per pupil basis, that those are the big things that the new money could buy, which would just be the regular, you know, just to reinvest in what we're doing, that we think that those things are underfunded, and that's maybe why we're not having the outcome that we need to have. So is that in the calendar too? Is, again, not answering the question, but just wanting to make sure. It kind of goes along with what Ms. Porter was saying. I just want to make sure I understand it.
That actually is already in the calendar. It's number 19. It happens like between December the 8th and January 4th, where we're looking at not only the goals, the strategies, but also maybe tweaking some of those strategies on some existing programs and then new programs. So that's happens within that cycle.
Is that with any, the board isn't mentioned there at all, so that just happens because, like, where is the board input into that?
The board, it would come forward when we, unless we add something before then. On January 9th, when we have the work session where we're first presenting the draft, there are no decisions really made until the February when we come forward, and we're coming earlier this year than we even did last year. So February 27th or 28th, we are coming to the board then to kind of talk about what the cabinet has reviewed, what some of the evaluations have shown, and some of the programs. And the Compassionate School Project may be one that comes up at that point, because we've heard also at that point from some of the schools, and they've voiced their concerns. So we would bring that forward to the board, and then we're using that information to develop the tentative budget, which is where the actual decisions are made by the board.
So instead of just presenting new initiatives, it would be a combination of new initiatives or new proposals potentially with information about existing ones and their effectiveness.
All right, any further discussion? All right, I'll just add my 2 cents to that as well. Program evaluations are critical, something that I know that we have had some challenges with in the past, so I'll just echo the importance that I think Ms. Porter, or Member Porter and Member Horner kind of highlighting on that as well. One other thing regarding our Finance Committee, it's my understanding through some discussions that another way for us to be able to gain not just input from regarding the board, but also from the community would be through that Finance Committee. So am I correct in assuming that?
Yes, I think all of our committees are formed to get community input on
Okay.
important initiatives.
So I want to throw that out there because those of that might be watching this or attending this meeting are obviously engaged, but this is your all's opportunity to be able to provide that type of input and let us know what you think is important. All right, with that being said, hearing no other discussion, I'd like to ask for a vote to receive the Comprehensive Educational Financial Planning and Management Calendar for 2018-19. Motion made by Member Horn, second made by Member Geese. All those in favor, motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Now we're on to our consent agenda, or consent calendar, rather. I do know that we do have items J and K that have been asked to be pulled down. Do board members have any other consent calendar agenda items that they would like to pull down? Member Geese.
Item F.
Item F. Any others? Member Duncan.
Quick question on I.
All right. Is that do you want that to be a quick question? You know what, we're just going to pull it down for a separate, they'll just be easier. All right, so I have items F, item I, item J, and K. Anyone else? Okay. So what I'd like to do is ask for a approval for the consent, for us to approve the consent calendar. Minus items F, I, J, and K. Is there a motion? Motion made by Member Horn, seconded by Member Duncan. All those in favor? Motion passes. Now we're on to our first pulled down item, which is item F. Member Geese, I believe you pulled this down.
Yes, I pulled this item down simply to draw attention to it and to speak on how valuable I think it is that we're starting to see the return of vocation education and vocation skills in our classrooms across the district. Vocational education is especially important to District 4, as many students in my district and their parents go on to get jobs in the vocational arts and also express high interest in these vocational skills as a long-term career. I pulled down item F because at Pleasure Ridge Park High School we're approving a revised bid for a welding lab that will be installed at PRP. I've said both on the record and off the record that I think one of our most innovative partnerships here at JCPS in collaboration with Vision 2020 is our partnership with Kentuckiana Works and making sure that every student, whether or not they're going to a post-secondary institution or not, graduate with something at their disposal, whether it be a certificate in a vocation, access to a community college, or a four-year college or university, that they graduate prepared with a skill. It's also surprising to me as I meet with members of my district how little is known about the return of the vocational arts in our schools. I've had conversations where people assume to be it to be an extinct item from the past, as it had been for several years prior, and people are largely unaware that the vocations are making a comeback in our schools. I think that's highly important as the son of a carpenter, who's still a member of our local carpenters union off Dixie Highway in the South End. I think it's very, very important that we recognize these as highly valued skills, and I'm glad to see them return to Louisville and, quite frankly, the United States.
Board Member Geese, I just wanted to also add to that this is a component of the Academies of Louisville, which we will be rolling out even more here in the next few weeks and having some press briefings at schools on the Academies of Louisville. But it is a part of the Academy model, so even bigger than just one particular program, a wall-to-wall model of students going through a pathway in something that interests them. I have a lot of knowledge of working at J-Town with welding and the success of welding there and how many kids it positively impacted. So PRP is a part of Academies of Louisville, and we'll see excellent return from this work.
Member Porter.
Just want to say quickly that it has never really gone away. It's the language that we currently use. You know how as things happen in life, the terminology changes. So once upon a time, there was this thing called vocational education, which now is called career and technical education. Once upon a time, there was something called Aaron's Vocational School, which no longer exists. Once upon a time, there were vocational schools where students went for half a day, and they no longer exist because it was determined that there was time wasted on the bus for transportation. So the programs came into the local high schools. So I hear the same concerns that you hear, and it's sometimes difficult to convince our constituents that it's still there. And once upon a time, there was a welding shop at PRP once upon a time. So if we stay around long enough, sometimes things come back. So I just want to say that although it's never totally gone away, the language has changed, the name of it has changed from vocational to career and tech ed, and the concept of the academies, as Dr. Polio has stated, is now a concept that we're asking our community to embrace. And it's one, career and tech ed will never go away, because when it's time for you to take your car to be fixed, you typically don't take it to a brain surgeon. So some things will never go away. We may call it something different, but I appreciate your comments, and I am equally as passionate about it staying alive and well in this city and in this district. So thank you for your comments.
Yes, and thank you very much. I'm glad to see the resurgence.
Member Duncan.
Just to pick up on what Ben is saying there about the fact that the community sometimes is not aware. I hope that we can figure ways, and I think with news conferences, I think those will be good ways to promote what we do, but this community needs to hear what we're doing and the things that these schools are producing, and it needs to be something that we intentionally promote, and I hope we can figure a way to do that, put more money into promoting our career tech programs. I've asked for this for several years, and I will be more than happy to support that.
Any further discussion? All right. Excuse me. Is there a motion to approve item F? Motion made by Member Geese, seconded by Member Duncan. All those in favor? Motion approved. Now on to item I. Ms. Duncan, I believe you brought down this item.
Yes, I just had a quick question. I wasn't quite sure what this meant. When we see a contract in the bids that I thought they were contract renewals, but I saw there the Males of Color Academy contract was listed in there, and the amount that it is, and it has a starting date and an end date. But why was that included among contract renewals? Was there a reason that was in there? We're not really renewing that contract, are we?
I believe it's contracts, and Cordelia, can you help me with that? I believe it, as I saw on the list, it was contracts that went from July, a certain time frame that it had to be included. That's a November to November contract, is that correct?
That is not item I don't think.
That was out of the bids.
Was an RFP.
There's the Males of Color as far as a professional services contract.
I think that's...
Is that what?
Well, I wrote it down on I, so I don't know.
Okay. Well, it just happens to be item J. And anytime there is a professional services contract, whether it is a renewal or an initial contract, then those come to the board. Did I answer that question?
Even though we've already approved that contract from 1 year to the next year, it has to come back again?
Normally they would come back. Now, on this particular one, the contract that you had originally approved was with Ms. Akins, I believe. This one is with Devonshire Diversity and Education Solutions, which is a different contract than the one that we had with Ms. Akins.
Did Devonshire mention Males of Color in that? Because I'm talking about a different section where we had contracts listed, like restorative practices was also in there.
Probably the monthly report?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
That's item
The
K.
monthly report is strictly a recap of all contracts that we've had as of July. It's a running total.
Okay.
So, and when you get that report once a month, which is here, but in addition, you have the individual contracts.
Right.
And then you get the monthly cumulative report, but it is not, it's not a duplication, it's just a listing to let you know of what has been approved through this
Okay.
board so far this fiscal year.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay. Since this item was pulled down, we do need a motion to approve it. Is there a motion? Member Duncan motions. Is there a second? Second by Member Geese. All those in favor? Motion passes. On to our next item. I believe Member Cole has brought down item J.
J and K, but obviously we'll
I'll get the K.
do J first. So I pulled these items because, as I said last meeting, I just can't in good conscience vote to approve any more money for school resource officers. I'm not, under any illusions that I'm going to keep this from passing necessarily, but I did want to take a moment to explain a little bit, why I'm doing this every meeting. So tonight we're being asked to approve $350,000 for SROs. That's a lot of money. At a meeting earlier this year, we spent over an hour trying to find about $50,000 so our deeper learning resource teachers could work more days. And deeper learning is a central pillar of Vision 2020. And to be clear, this isn't about any individual SRO. The vast majority of SROs are doing the absolute best they can. The question is whether or not it's appropriate, necessary, or even beneficial to have police in schools. I think it's important to note that putting SROs in schools was not based on any evidence, nor was it, and I was actually under this mistaken impression myself until recently doing some more research, nor was it a response to the high-profile school shootings like Columbine. Rather, the push for SROs was part of the tough on crime movement that's led to mass incarceration, especially in many African-American communities. And as part of that tough on crime movement, politicians promoted this concept of the juvenile super predator, which we now know is completely fabricated racial stereotype that just doesn't have any basis in reality. Among more kind of practical concerns about SROs is that they can lead to a false sense of security, which can lead to an over-reliance on SROs instead of promoting measures that are actually proven to be effective in increasing school safety. For instance, one of the things we know for sure is that spending money on mental health counselors is much more effective than on SROs. And I was actually surprised to find this myself, and this data is it's a little dated. It's from 2011, but I couldn't find anything more recent. But as of 2011, reported rates of school violence and theft were at their lowest levels since data was first collected by the National Center for Education Statistics in 1992. So again, the expansion of SROs is not a response to increasing levels of disorder in schools. In fact, our schools have become much more orderly. As I said last time, there's absolutely no data that shows that SROs are effective in preventing violence. And one thing that research does show is that implicit bias is present at every step in the discipline process, and thus students of color are much more likely to be charged with an offense and arrested when there is an SRO present. And then just to conclude, regarding one of the specific agreements that we are voting on tonight, which I think is part of item J, a few things that give me pause about that specific agreement is oversight is pretty minimal. When SROs are in school, they effectively operate as a one-person law enforcement unit. Training, while there is some training mandated for SROs, if a substitute SRO is necessary, they don't have to receive that same training. So if an SRO joins up in the middle of the year to replace one that was injured or had to take a leave, they don't get that training that the full-time SROs go. And then while to its credit, the document talks about, wanting to evaluate the effectiveness of the SRO program, that's just, there's no way to do that as of this point, other than just kind of anecdotal impressions of a few school personnel. So those are all the reasons that I will continue to vote no on any budget items for SROs.
Any further discussion? Member Duncan?
Well, I was just going to refer everybody back to the list that we were sent, Dr. Polio sent, of the arrests that were made in our buildings where there are SROs, the arrests and the type of crimes or offenses that were listed there. I mean, when there were 22, I counted 22 weapons, and these are criminal offenses happening in our schools. So I don't know what more proof there needs to be that as long as there are these crimes happening within our buildings, that there is a need to have somebody trained more than teachers to deal with the crimes that are happening. I mean, we had the list and saw people aren't arrested for doing nothing. They're arrested for those crimes that were listed. So I will continue to be very supportive of having our SROs in our buildings.
Vice Chair Wellner, then Member Geese.
Well, pretty much across the board, I agree with the points that Dr. Kolb has made about SROs and what the research shows and what the dynamics, the political dynamics that brought SROs into being in the first place. I share the concerns. I feel like I need to explain my vote because I will vote to support the funding for the reasons that we discussed last time. Schools have made their plans. They've developed their staffing around the SROs, as Dr. Polio pointed out, when SROs are working well in school buildings. And I've witnessed this firsthand in some of the District 6 schools. Students have wonderful relationships with these officers. They're really part of the school staff. They're really doing a wonderful job. However, I would hope that we'll have a report and some more information soon about the standard of training, the substitute issue that we brought up where SROs don't necessarily have, the substitutes don't have training. The ones who are there don't necessarily have training in child and adolescent development to know even what behaviors are appropriate. As far as the criminal arrests, many of those arrests, and I agree with Ms. Duncan, you know, if there's criminal activity, it needs to be dealt with as such. However, when there are positive relationships in the schools and when there's a high trust culture in the schools, what we're seeing is that students are reporting, students are telling, students are admitting what they've done without incident in the school. So the emphasis on the positive school culture remains incredibly important. I was also struck by the arrest data that we've reviewed, how many students were arrested for vague and subjective kinds of offenses like disorderly conduct, and I've not seen the racial breakdown of that, but I'm going to guess, just like with our own code of conduct, that there are disparities in how those arrests that are made, and what's perceived to be disorderly conduct in a student of color is maybe different from what's perceived as disorderly conduct in a white student. So I remain gravely concerned about these issues. I'm glad we're discussing it. I'm glad you're bringing this up. And I'm not going to vote to take funding away from schools that they're counting on to operate their schools this year. But I do feel that this is a topic that needs a much deeper dive going forward.
Member Gies.
I think that we've heard a presentation of evidence from both Ms. Duncan and Dr. Kolb that both are certainly valid in their own right, and that somewhere in the middle of both of those data points the truth lies. While I would not support an initiative to strip SROs in a blanket form from the schools, I think what's needed is a study and an evaluation of the SROs in each school, a study and an evaluation of their training, a more thorough breakdown of the data that we collect, and then to evaluate to see where problems lie and how we can create solutions from those problems. I'm not in favor of throwing out the baby with the bathwater, but rather inspecting both sides of the issue and making an educated and reasonable determination on what to do moving forward.
Any further comment? Member Porter.
When we discussed this last time, I think one of the things that I asked Dr. Polio to bring to the board was a more comprehensive look of what our SROs look like. One of the things you will see is that we have various providers for our SROs. So tonight we're looking at a different provider. Same job, same work, but a different provider, because this is coming to us from the Sheriff's Department, and we get our SROs from various departments. One of the things, because I've kind of asked some questions in the meantime, I know that JCPS is part of the training for the staff sometimes there in the building. I know that Dr. Everett's office has provided some training and to make sure that these SROs are student-friendly, and I think that's Dr. Lamisa Mark-Johns, and I know that Dr. John Marshall has made presentations to the SROs. The issue that will come before this board is the issue of are we profiling our students? Are we, in fact, I won't say arresting some more than others, but the data will show that. So the challenge for this district, not just this board, for this district, is to provide a safe environment for our teachers and our students, and to not to necessarily racially profile some students. So again, I would defer to Dr. Polio and staff to talk to us about how to provide a safe environment. The community will speak to us about what the numbers look like, because they are in some cases blatant, and we will have to be responsive to that. But I don't want to say, as Dr. Wilner says, that they are necessarily bad people. They are there to support schools and to give a sense of security in our schools. So again, I would defer to Dr. Polio and staff. I appreciate everything that Dr. Kolb has said, because he's bringing it to us research-based, and Ms. Duncan and Mr. Gies are talking to us about the numbers that we are currently looking at in the schools. But at the end of the day, we are starting school, And I think that we need to do a comprehensive look-see and a recommendation from the superintendent and the staff. I do know that we are training our SROs various ways, and we are, in fact, trying to make it student-friendly, but we have to pay attention to what the data says. And the data says that there is a difference in students that are arrested, what the racial composition of that looks like. So I think we have some work to do, but we as a board will have to defer to Dr. Polio and staff to bring something to us. So that's, I'm kind of hitting everybody along the way, but it's an issue, and we have to acknowledge that first step is face it before we can fix it. So Dr. Polio, help us with that.
I will, and I'll say this, that I think we've made huge progress in the past 12 months. I think Dr. Zeitz has been a huge part of trying to align it across every school that has it. So just like we try with behavior, that if you walk in one school, the same thing is happening. And it's very difficult to do. We want to do the same thing with SROs. So there is not a wide variety of things happening. And it's difficult, as we said, because there's several organizations at play in here, that many of them have different policies and things. But I think we've made very important strides in that under Dr. Zeitz's leadership over the past year. I'll say this, I said I think at last meeting, I've had the opportunity to work with 3 of the finest SROs, I think, in my career that we've had that are fantastic educators. Now, I know they're not all like that. I've been very fortunate in that way, that are fantastic educators, not just police officers, but have become a part of that culture. Our job is to make sure that we do all of that. A couple things, we'll continue to provide ongoing data, so it's not just at the end of the year. We're also, Dr. Zeitz and I spoke about doing a mini lit review for you on the research in regards to SROs in schools nationally. So we're going to provide that in the coming weeks as we look at some of the research. And as you know, in research, there are both sides to a coin many times in research, but we want you to have that data too. But we will continue to give that ongoing data.
Thank you, Dr. Polio. Any further questions? Okay. The only thing I will have to, I'll add to that is, you know, obviously Dr. Polio is pulling together this information to the board, so this will be forthcoming. It may not be, I don't think there's a particular deadline for that, but I don't believe it will be within the next board meeting or not. So, but it is something that I'm sure the superintendent and the administration are working on. One other comment regarding some of the information that we were presented that was mentioned during this discussion regarding arrest at schools is that please understand that there were some citations that were given on school grounds that were counted as arrest. So you would see something along the lines of passing a stopped school bus, which is what I would assume with the stop sign extended and the lights on. Someone passed a bus, they got a citation, but that shows up as an arrest within the numbers. So just understand that not all of those are arrests in the typical way that we might think of them, but if someone was cited on school grounds, that would be counted as an arrest. All right, with that said, and hearing no other further discussion, is there a motion to approve item J? Motion to approve is made by Member Duncan, second, made by Member Geese. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion passes 6-1. Next item up would be another item that Member Kolb has brought down, which would be item K. Member Kolb, would you like to go into item K? Nope, separate vote. Okay, so separate vote on item K. Is there a motion made by Member Geese, second? Is there a second made by Vice Chair Wilner? All those in favor? All those opposed? Again, 6-1. All right, that concludes our consent calendar. Now we're on to board planning calendar. Are there any discussion regarding the board planning calendar? Member Duncan.
I don't know that this is should be on the planning calendar, but I know we need to pick up the thread again about when we talked about the use of metal detectors. We have issues where we want to reduce that number of weapons coming in there, and that's why I counted that, because I saw 22 weapons, and those were the ones just reported where they had the SROs. I don't know the other schools. So I think I don't want to drop that thread that we started back in the spring where it was determined that we were going to look at metal detectors and how we could most effectively use those to help us reduce the number of weapons coming into our schools. We don't want any of them in our schools, but we need some way to be able to do that. And then I wanted to ask Dr. Polio about the dashboard. We used to get a dashboard. Do you think there is a way to report some things from culture and climate through the use of that dashboard that we had before? Or would you rather just forget the dashboard and report on the 3 areas the way that you have done that? I mean, I was just thinking it might be helpful to add some dashboard information to help reinforce what you're talking about progress in culture and climate.
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm not real familiar with what was on your dashboard, but I can check into that. But what I do think we need to do, we are going to work on having some ongoing surveys for staff that are as, the least cumbersome as possible. So we don't want a full comprehensive school survey, but on a gold day, could we ask staff to do a 12-question survey, a brief one, and get some data from that on culture and climate. And so we can do some things like that. We can do behavior and culture and climate, but we want to be able to do those. So we can take a look at adding those to that dashboard.
All right, thank you.
Any other discussion? Member Horn?
I just wanted to see if we might update the on-deck issues. We had a retreat, and there were just maybe 3 or 4 on-deck issues that we identified were key issues. Potentially, this laundry list of things, which some of them have been dealt with already, could be just updated and modified and make sure that we're not forgetting what we actually put on our on-deck issues from retreat.
Okay.
We'll check those.
Just to be clear, I don't want to remove anything that anyone would be concerned about, but are we looking at just putting on deck issues, just those items that we're really focusing on it within the retreat? Is that correct?
It just seems like with Dr. Polio coming on, he might take a look at the, list that's like extensive list that's on there and just see if that's what's going on with that. Some of us, may find utility in looking at them week after week, meeting after meeting. Some of us may not. So maybe he can review it and just see what he thinks. And I just don't want to lose track of those main ideas that we put together and agreed on were on-deck issues from the retreat.
Okay, we will review that. Anyone else? Okay. Vote to receive the planning calendar. Is there a motion? Motion made by Member Duncan. Is there a second? Second made by Member Horn. All those in favor? Motion passes. Now we're on to board reports. Are there any board reports? Okay. Member Porter.
Wanted to take this opportunity again. At our last meeting, I talked about community engagement and the work that the neighborhood places had done to strategically have back-to-school events, and I wanted to call out another event that happened in the district that I serve, but it was for anyone in the community. And this year, for the first time, Norton Hospital did their first Unity Jam. It was held at the West End School for the entire community, and in that opportunity there were health screenings plus back-to-school surprise, and community organizations were there with information that they could hand out for anyone that needed it, and JCPS was there as well, handing out information. And I had an opportunity to go to a pre-planning meeting. Diversity, Equity, and Poverty Department was there handing out information about the calendar and questions to ask. But I had an opportunity to meet the 2 ladies who had this vision. and she brought it back to Norton. And I want to give a thank you to Kirsty Crenshaw and Corinza Townsend for having the vision, but more importantly, I want to thank Norton for stepping up and doing it. And that day at the West End School in the outside grounds and inside the Darrell Griffin Center, I had an opportunity to thank Al Cornish and Norton CEO Russell Cox for making the vision a reality, because it was a beautiful day, it was well attended, and we continue to talk about the importance of community engagement. So I wanted to call that out and quickly talk about not only day one visits. I'm trying to get them all done, so I can't do them all in day one. I can't move as fast as Dr. Polio. But I have visited a number of schools, day 1, 3, and 4, and the culture and climate is excellent in the schools. The young people are excited, as we saw on TV yesterday, and I've been taking pictures of bulletin boards, because bulletin boards kind of welcome you into the schools and what is being said. And on one of the bulletin boards it says, be somebody who makes everybody feel like a somebody. Be somebody who makes everybody feel like a somebody. So from that, this week I got a letter from a parent from one of the schools, and I just want to say a couple of the points that the parent made. I'm not going to call the school, that's not important, because we have many schools that would fit in this category. But it was a thank you letter from a parent, and she wanted us to know that the culture in her child's school is compassionate, inclusive, and empowering. That the teachers helped her daughter to know and to play on her strengths. They encouraged her to strengthen her weaknesses and allowed her to express herself. School was held for her she felt safe in her school family. So the school had embraced her daughter. And I'm saying that, and I'm purposely not calling the name of the school, because we have many schools like that. And as we talk about the culture and climate, I think that we need to spend time talking about what works well, facing what does not work well, and fixing that. But it has been an energetic opening of school, and a lot of curiosity with our young people and our parents. So to everyone, I would have to say, great job, and hold on, I'm going to get there. I've been to 16 schools so far. I've got a few more to go to, but it's been great to see the students, because that's why I particularly show up every day. So Dr. Polio and staff, pat yourselves on the back. But as Dr. Polio says, don't give up after the first day. We got a few more days to get to the end of the year. I just want to say thank you, and I wanted to share some of the contents from a parent's letter who is saying to us what it has meant for her and for her child. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Member Horn?
I should have gone before you and not after you. Well, I just wanted to draw your attention. I posted 2 reports. The second report is just really, I've really enjoyed getting into some of the schools in my district. And I highlighted the time on the first day I went to Crosby and met some fabulous bus drivers, and evidently Fraser, I don't know if Dr. Razor knows Fraser, he's like an award-winning bus driver, I'm told. I'm not sure. I think it's because he's always there, like he's always in attendance for years and years. And then I invited the mayor of Douglas Hills to join me, and she is just absolutely loving Crosby and is just such an advocate for our school. So we're really blessed to have community partners. Also, I had a wonderful time with Dr. Polio at Wilder on the first day of school, and we had the mayor and we had Angela Leet, who's our councilwoman for the district, so it was quite interesting and fun. And then I spent some time at Ballard meeting our new principal, and I'm so impressed. I'm so excited about Jason Noose, who's our Ballard principal. And already I'm hearing from parents and kids and teachers and just staff. They're just so excited about our principal at Ballard. So it's really exciting. And I spent my day at the Eclipse at Dunn with the 3rd grade class. And it was a wonderful time to be surrounded by just exuberance and children. And it just is so good to get into the schools because it reminds me of why, I'm on the school board. So then I just wanted to also draw your attention to my other report, which is the Finance Committee, the Advisory Committee. And I did take the advice from the retreat and organize my report as a summary of the committee activities, and then I had the information, which there's a link to the handouts, and there's some really great handouts. I want to thank Cordelia and her staff for doing such a good job with the committee, and Julie for typing wonderful minutes, and just all of the information. It's a really wealth of information that's really great. We didn't have any recommendation this time, but we will next time. We were asked to make a recommendation to take that lesson learned document and just kind of come back to the board, and so we'll try to do that. We reviewed it last time as a committee, and we have those notes, and then we'll take that and put another little, outline for you. But one big thing I just wanted to make sure I mentioned from our committee meeting, that we looked at the revenue generators and the expenses for JCPS, and something just really struck me, and I think struck majority of the committee members, is that we're now like under 30% for the state funding for JCPS. So that means like we're putting in as a district, the majority of the money comes from Jefferson County to pay for our schools. And because the federal government, it's just flatlined. We're not getting any more from the federal government. So that's in the report that at some point, what Chris brought and drew out during our tax rate hearing, we're not doing anything, but it's just, we're in a desperate situation that we need to take care of our own and look at our facilities and really come together as a community. So it's not as upbeat, but I wanted to make sure that I did say that publicly. It just, we're paying for the majority of our schools within Jefferson County with our own tax dollars. So.
Vice Chair Wilner.
So my report is written as well, and invite you to take a look at it. But I'll just want to highlight a couple of quick things. On August 13th, the Metro Council of Metro Louisville Council had pulled together a moment of unity in Jefferson Park that was a response to the violence in Charlottesville, Virginia, and an opportunity for our community to stand in solidarity with Charlottesville. This was a bipartisan rally. Many Metro Council members were there from both parties. State elected representatives were there, religious leaders, community leaders. Many comments were made about the white supremacy and the hatred and the violence that's being sown, and this was an opportunity where our community came together, very large crowd, a diverse crowd, in a very peaceful moment and a reflective moment for our city to, again, stand in solidarity with the violence across the country. So I wanted to call that out. I wanted to thank our community elected officials who pulled that together very, very rapidly. And I was very honored to be there with other local and state elected officials to be part of that event. On a less somber note, I'm also just feeling the enthusiasm of this new school year. I've only visited 11 schools, so I've got some catching up to do with my colleagues and Dr. Polio, but again and again, I'm hearing this is the best start to the school year we've ever had, and I'm saying, remember day 100, remember day 150, remember day 175, but there's just a real sort of contagious energy going on, and at every school, people are announcing, I love my job, I'm really, really good at it, and I'm using it to help our kids, and so it's just really inspiring, and I want to thank our employees who are out there in the schools every single day, and the district staff who are supporting that work. There's just, it feels good to be in our schools right now, and I don't think I've ever done this before, but I'm gonna we had a speaker from the non-agenda speaker who had some information about students with dyslexia, and I was sitting here seeing our lead psychologist, Dr. Joe Barjone, who does an outstanding job for this district, not only himself, but in training other psychologists, Dr. Alicia Averett sitting out there. So I was sitting here having this impulse to get up and say, you have to meet Dr. Joe Barjone, and I was literally trying to think if I could leave the meeting to make that introduction when I saw Dr. Joe follow the gentleman out the door and have some conversation with him. So I just really want to thank our district staff for being so responsive to Dr. Barjone in particular and Dr. Averett in particular with that issue. And I know that Dr. Polio will be following up with that gentleman as well. So that concludes my spoken report. Thank you.
Member Geese?
A couple of weeks ago, I passed an interesting anniversary. I was reminded by a few friends of mine that back in the earlier weeks in August, I'd passed the 1-year anniversary of filing to run for my seat on the Board of Education. I know that's an anniversary that I most likely share with Dr. Kolb as well, albeit by a few days, more or less. And so that stoked within me a moment of reflection to see where the board has gone in a year's time, to see where the district has gone in a year's time, and then realizing the 6 months that I've had the honor of sitting at this chair. And so I can remember running and deciding to run, preparing to embark upon my first year of in the classroom teaching, having been in education in the past, but going into the classroom for the first time in a different county, taking on all of the rigors of KTIP, and if you're in education, you know how rigorous that is, managing running for a board seat, and then taking the oath of office and serving my term to the best of my ability. And in thinking about that, I remember some of the talking points that members of the community, whether it be on their front porch or whether it be at a community festival or simply in the grocery store, would come up and communicate with me. And those were 3 simple things. They were leadership, they were culture and climate, and they were efficiency. And as I take in the reports of my fellow board members and as I continue to be out and about in the community and really evaluating what's taken place in a year's time and 6 months' time since coming to sit in this seat, I'm really, really pleased in what I'm seeing, and I think I speak for all of us generally when I say that, in particular when we talk about culture. You know, I've had the opportunity to visit a few more schools, had the opportunity to meet with priority school teachers several weeks ago, and had the opportunity simply to read comments both sent to me directly via email and comments online. I never thought I would see a day where the majority of the comments online about JCPS, frankly, were positive, knowing how online comments typically go. To see the enthusiasm in the community is truly remarkable. And so I think that, you know, while I recognize we have a lot more work to go here, I think seeing this initial culture shift has been dramatic. And I think it's something that we should all take pause on and reflect on, and also continue to say, how can we keep this positive momentum going? And I know there's been hiccups here and there, but I do think that we've made good progress. The second of which being leadership, and I'll use our decision, Dr. Polio's decision on keeping the students in school for the eclipse while other districts were releasing, and I know that that was not without small hiccups as well along the way. And we had this discussion before the meeting as a board. When we look at our 2 main reasons, which were, as Dr. Polio mentioned, equity and deeper learning, I think that we did end up making that right decision of keeping our kids in school. And I know that that was a decision that some thought was wonderful and others thought were terrible, but it was a decision that took leadership and a sense of decisiveness that I think we had been lacking in the past and that I was glad to see. The third being efficiency. Today, although a bit ironically, we had just one public speaker, whereas in the past we'd had many. One item that we worked to amend as a board over the last 6 months, starting back in January, was creating our board time and our board space as a time and space that would be more conducive to public opinion and having the public come in and share their opinions in a timely manner. We were able to respond to that, and on that note, this may be the earliest that we've ever adjourned a board meeting. preparing
Get ahead
to
of
join
yourself.
here at 8:45 possibly. I'm hoping so. So when we think about those three things in the span of a year to 6 months with climate and culture, leadership and efficiency, I have to say that I personally am pleased. I know that members of District 4 are pleased, and I hope that we'll continue that momentum in moving forward.
Any further comments? Member Duncan.
I just would like to thank our Dr. Razor and our facilities personnel for the phenomenal job they did this summer getting these schools renovated and ready to go. I know I was at Medora the first day, Dr. Polio was there, and what a morale booster that is to have that new feeling in the building in addition to beginning a new year. So I know it took amazingly hard work to get all of that done. I know Ken Wood, I passed that every day this summer and saw how in the world, or asked myself, how in the world are they going to get all of that finished? So, I mean, I just think our work with facilities is just phenomenal in the summer, and I just want to say that and express my appreciation to the people who get these schools ready the way they do.
Anyone else? The unfortunate side effect of going last is that a lot of things that you wanted to talk about were already talked about. So I want to tag on to at least the last two comments that my colleagues have made. First of all, regarding the first day team, again to Dr. Razor and the team and all the administrators and teachers throughout the district that made our first day of school yet another success. And luckily we had no traffic jams on I-71 to slow us down. We didn't have to make any water runs. So I want to express my appreciation as a parent and as a board member for a smooth first day, or actually almost first week of school. Furthermore, I also want to express my appreciation because, like Member Duncan, Tully Elementary had a lot of stuff going on, and like 2 days after school was out, the entire parking lot was full of storage trailers and storage pods, and even had an outhouse on top of the school at one point. Not an outhouse, a porta pot. Sounds a lot better when I say porta pot. So I hope that's still not on top of the school. Okay, Dr. Razor's ensuring me that that's not the case. So, but we were replacing a roof, so if you're wondering why that was there. And I just want to, again, echo Member Duncan's comment about that, and the fact that, you know, a lot's done during the summer. And I know that Tully staff really appreciates everything that was done, and as a board member for Tully, I also appreciate that as well. To follow up on Member Geese's Eclipse comments, I was one of the parents that pulled my kids out of school for the Eclipse. I had two reasons for doing that. One, I had a family event in Western Kentucky that we went ahead and turned into a 3-day weekend. And on that last day, of course, we were in the path of totality. And I understand that some of the community were saying that this seemed to be anticlimactic, or the fact that, wow, it's really bright, even if you have 5% of the sun, which it is. But I can assure you, and for those of you who are interested in 2024, being in the path of totality, and Dr. Wilner can attest to this because she was down in that area as well, is quite an amazing experience. The words cannot really describe that. And sitting in traffic all the way home, I will say that 2.5 minutes was still worth it. And it's also great to kind of know that we had an opportunity to teach people words like syzygy, and to also learn that the reason that the moon and the sun are actually seeming to be the same size is because the sun is 400 times farther away than the moon, but the moon is 400 times closer. So it all lines up. Now, by the way, that won't always be the case. The moon's orbit is adjusting, so after a while you will not have solar eclipses. There's your science lesson for today. But the fact that we had an entire day dedicated to that type of discussion, and this school district chose to have our kids in our classrooms. And yes, we had 77% participation, but of that 77%, and we have the same concern during snow days, how many of those got fed? How many of those had a regular, stable environment for that day? How many of those kids got instruction and learned something brand new? And I think that, again, to echo Member Geese's comments about that, I think that took real leadership, and we, took it on the chin a little bit in social media, and we had an issue regarding whether or not classes were good enough or not. But I think at the end of the day, a lot of things worked out, and I just want to say thank you to Dr. Polio, to our legal counsel who was instrumental in that, in finding out that information as well as our entire administration and staff. I do want to take a couple more minutes, and since we're constrained to open meetings laws, I do want to have just a quick little discussion regarding future planning of our calendar. Obviously, we have a few more months left in the year, but we need, as chair, I want to start trying to plan ahead and get an idea of how to plan for next year's meeting schedule. I'm curious because some of the ways that the law is states, we're kind of constrained by if we announce something and we put out a schedule and then we change it later on, then that causes any change a special meeting, and we're kind of constrained by that. So we kind of did this last year where I think we announced the first 4 or 5 months, maybe 6 months of our year of our meetings. I was wondering from my colleagues, and we're not voting on anything, I just want to get your feedback on this as to whether or not, rather than planning out the entire year's worth of board meetings, that we look at relatively soon coming up with the first 4 months or 6 months of approving those board meetings. Now give schools time to plan for that, but also gives us the flexibility that if something comes up a little bit later in the year, we don't have to call any changes to that plan a special meeting. So if anybody wants to chime in, please. Anyone? Member Porter.
I'd like for us to go back and evaluate what we did last year and why we did that, and also to say that when we set our calendar, other organizations within the district set their calendar as well. And there are many organizations that have events based on the dates that we have our board meetings. So before I can give you an informed decision about that, I need more information. Even when we change the date, although we make a decision for the year, changing the date does not mean anything except it becomes a special called meeting, and at that point we cannot change the agenda. Am I right, Mr. Mellon? With a special called meeting, we can change the date. Once we set the agenda, then we cannot necessarily change the agenda. Is that correct?
That's correct. You can only at a special called meeting discuss what's on the agenda.
Okay, so I mean, I think that it's great that we think that we can, the 7 of us can make it convenient and conducive to us, but our dates are beneficial to local schools, and when we have 150 schools, I would just like more information before we say, let's just vote on a 6-month calendar.
Okay.
That's just my personal opinion, one of
Sure.
7.
Just to clarify, I'm not asking for any approval of any dates or anything along those lines. I'm just getting an idea that would the board prefer to have a full year come before the board, or 6 months or 4 months, the first 4 months of the year, the first 6 months of the year, the full year. Last year we did things a little bit differently. I think we had said the first 6 months or so, and then later by, was it March, I believe, that we went ahead and approved the rest of the year. I'm just kind of curious about that, and again, just to reiterate, the concern here is that if this were a special called meeting, for example, we would not be able to amend the agenda to move the action item to an information item. We would not have the flexibility to move or to add the action item regarding contract negotiations that we had earlier today. So those things were things that were added, and that would not, that flexibility would not be available to us if we had any changes to this particular board meeting date. So I'm just going to, and this isn't just the date that's an issue, it's also the location. And we do have an issue of that coming up, where we originally had announced that we had a board location that's going to be at Ballard High School, but now it's going to be at Norton Commons. That particular date will be a special called meeting, which means that agenda, once set, is locked. So very little flexibility there. So I just wanted to just get an idea, 4, 6, full year, just so we can start getting an idea how to plan for this. Vice Chair Wilner.
I think I would mostly defer to staff on this. It seems like in not having the whole calendar laid out, there were some concerns or anxiety that were caused by that, by not having those dates locked in. And I don't really remember the reasons that we did it half and half last year, except I wonder if part of it had to do with some new board members coming on and waiting to know about their schedules, but there's no election in 2017, so we'll have the same board at least until next November. So I'm open to whatever the staff recommends.
Any other discussion? Okay, so it's something for the administration to at least think about, and maybe we'll have further discussion on this when our agenda allows it. All right, that being said, and hearing no other concerns expressed about anything on board reports, we're going to move on to our next item, which of course there is no executive session and no action items needed because of that. So now we're on to our very last item, which is adjournment. So is there a motion to adjourn? Motion made by Member Porter, second by Member Geese. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. We are adjourned. Thank you.